Welcome back. We're talking about the 2017 BRICS Summit beginning September the 3rd in the city of Xiamen, China. Let's go back to our panel. And Sourabh, to you first of all, there is a border dispute going on between China and India over a disputed part of Bhutan. It's not clear to me, has that border dispute been set aside so that the summit can go ahead unhindered, or has it actually been resolved?
The immediate issue at this moment has been resolved. India and China have a long-running border dispute which will not be resolved anytime soon, though they have made progress on that front. There was a specific issue with regard to road building in close proximity to the border in one specific area, and there was a standoff in this regard. That has now been resolved. It was resolved, I think, within this last week. One of the important factors to take away, there are two important points to take away. One doesn't relate to the BRICS, and that issue is that India and China actually have very, very good boundary management protocols. And basically, they've not lost a life in over 40 years despite having that border dispute, and they managed to coordinate this withdrawal. But the more important point is this. The main leaders realized that they are going to meet at BRICS. They had been in intensive negotiations over the last 2 months. And it was, I feel, the fact that they were going to meet at BRICS and they did not want a cloud over the BRICS meeting that got them to resolve this issue just in time. So BRICS actually played an important role in that regard.
Another issue that caught my eye is that President Xi Jinping and the Chinese are very keen to bring up the issue of protectionism, and I think that that is an indication of their feelings towards Donald Trump policies in Washington, D.C. Now, Qinduo in China cares about protectionism. Donald Trump is threatening tariffs on all sorts of issues that may or may not in the future affect the second largest economy in the world. What's the view from Beijing on this?
Yes, this is a big issue, obviously, facing China. I think one of the most pressing issue facing China from outside. I think, as I pointed out, if the 5 countries can speak with one voice, the voice will be much, much louder. I think that they have something in common in terms of globalization, both as emerging economies that's, fall into their national interests to continue to push forward the globalization and to continue to fight the rise of protectionism and also sometimes economic nationalism.
Okay.
There's talk of economic war against China. So obviously China is on the edge of, preparing for the worst, let's say. And because like a country like China, I think, like India, they are benefiting a lot from this current international trade system. So they would love to see this open system, this trade or free trade system to continue.
Okay.
But somehow, in developed world like the U.S. and Britain, you can see there's a backfire of globalization. So you see the different voices here.
Andrea, President Xi is very keen to move BRICS on into its next phase. That's part of the reason for this summit, as set out in the letter that he sent to all the leaders. How much of a part will the service sector, which of course is very big in the legacy economies, very big indeed, how much of a part will the service sector play in future expansion for BRICS?
I think a very big part. They have been very interested in expanding that part of trade specifically, and that's also very aligned with what Brazil is trying to do. There are parts of the Brazilian economy that have shown great potential to grow, and the service sector is part of that, especially in a time where manufacturing and industry are suffering a little bit of a low stage inside Brazil. So that's definitely going to play a big part. It has been stated that all the BRIC countries are interested in increasing that. There has been, they have agreed that they will talk about this specifically in the coming days in this summit. So I think that we should really expect great announcements on that regard.
Sourabh, what are the stumbling blocks going forward? What may trip up BRICS? And indeed, just a sub-question there, is its success dependent on the legacy economies aging rather quicker than had been anticipated that they would?
At the end of the day, for the BRICS to succeed, they need to succeed on their own merit and not because somebody else faded away or somebody else failed. They need to succeed individually as national economies and then as economies which have integrated with each other and into the world economic system. So that is essential for their success. The areas where there are stumbling blocks is because talking economically, politically, there's a commonality on a lot of global challenges. They take very similar positions, and as you will see again in the BRICS joint statement, it's going to be a long one, and on a lot of areas of global challenges, they will have fairly harmonious views. But on the economic side, countries are at different stages in their development. There are different growth models, and also their natural endowments are very different. At one area that does allow for cooperation, but at another point that also provides a stumbling block. So at the end of the day, the degree to which each of them can individually reform themselves will expand the space in which they can economically coordinate and integrate with themselves.
Okay, and finally, can I ask you all to do the impossible? Andrea, just tell us, for you, what would be a successful BRICS? What's the outcome that you're hoping to see? Just in a few words, if you will.
For Brazil, this is a sales pitch. So the success looks like good announcements in terms of investments that are going to be made in Brazil in the coming years. There is an expectation of $10 billion to come into Brazil. I think that's a little bit too optimistic, but we'll see what comes out of the meeting.
Sourabh, briefly.
This is the BRICS 9th summit. They will complete 1 decade next year. At this point of time, that their horizons look forward as to where they go in the next decade, and literally how they expand, the pace at which they expand, and how wisely they do that, but how they look forward to the next decade of where the BRICS will be.
Maxim, you're sitting right on the Silk Road there. You know what that means for President Xi. What would be a successful outcome for you?
I think, I believe that BRICS is already a great success, because originally it was an artificial test tube baby, but it proved that it can exist and it works and it's expanding, so it's already a success. But the real success for BRICS would be if its voice, the voice of BRICS, the voice of BRICS countries will be heard, and that it will have an impact on the world development. And generally speaking, the real success would be when there is a BRICS summit, there will be a lot of media coverage worldwide. It will mean that the voice of the BRICS country will be really heard.
Well, you're certainly going to get plenty of coverage on this station. Of that, there's no doubt. And Qinduo, this is very important for the city of Xiamen, isn't it? Just very briefly, what would you see as a successful outcome? What will make you smile on Tuesday morning?
Well, yeah, well, I think, you know, as long as their like effects will be felt you know, in the rest of the world. For example, there's this unfairness in the international finance system. You know, like IMF director always comes from European countries. World Bank governor always comes from the United States. So there's also unfair representative in those financial institutes. And also on global, warming, climate change, those countries have a common interests. And on the continuation of the globalization, they also share this common interests. I think as long as they are united and they speak with one voice, and the impact will be felt, that's a success.
Those are truly global issues. Andrea, Sourabh, Maxim, and Qinduo, thank you all very much indeed for a most interesting conversation. Thank you very much.